The teddy bear in the donation box had the same heart-shaped birthmark as the one I'd given my daughter before my plane went down. But how was that possible when everyone thought I was dead? I never expected a simple charity event would turn my world upside down. After surviving a plane crash that everyone assumed had killed me, I'd rebuilt my life from nothing, becoming wealthier than I'd ever been before. No one recognized the homeless man I once was after the accident. But fate has a funny way of reconnecting broken threads, and that little teddy bear with the unique heart-shaped mark was about to change everything again. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The private jet shaking violently, the oxygen masks dropping, and my desperate call to my 5-year-old daughter Emily. "Daddy loves you, princess. Keep Mr. Hart close to you," I told her, referring to the special teddy bear I'd given her that morning. It had a unique heart-shaped birthmark on its paw that matched the one on her wrist, our special connection. The crash was devastating, and I was the only survivor, washed ashore miles from the wreckage with no identification and a severe head injury that stole my memories for months. While the world mourned the death of successful businessman James Wilson, I became John, a nameless homeless man trying to piece together fragments of a past life. The amnesia was almost total. Faces, names, my identity, all gone in an instant. Only vague feelings remained, like phantom limbs of a life I once lived. The doctors at the shelter clinic said it might be temporary or it might never fully return. All I had was this recurring dream of a little girl laughing and a teddy bear with a heart. I didn't know then that these weren't just dreams, but pieces of my soul fighting to be remembered. For 2 years, I lived on the streets, taking odd jobs, sleeping in shelters, and slowly building myself back up. Something inside me, perhaps the businessman I used to be, drove me to save every penny. I started with selling newspapers, then moved to helping at construction sites, and eventually managed to rent a tiny room. The hunger that gnawed at my stomach was nothing compared to the emptiness inside my heart. Something was missing, something precious, but I couldn't remember what. Every child I saw would make my heart ache for reasons I couldn't explain. One day, while working at a construction site, I overheard 2 investors discussing a risky property development. Something clicked in my mind. Numbers, projections, market analyses, knowledge I didn't know I possessed suddenly surfaced. With my saved $200, I approached them with a proposition that surprised even myself. "Your calculations on the eastern section are off by 15%. If you adjust the design as I suggest, you'll increase profits by 40%. They laughed at first, a dusty construction worker in worn clothes giving financial advice. But something in my confident delivery made one of them take a chance. That chance changed everything. My suggestions proved wildly successful, and within months, I became their consultant, then partner. My business instincts returned faster than my personal memories, and within 3 years, I had built a new fortune through smart investments and property developments. I became Michael Stone, a mysterious new player in the business world, whose instincts seemed almost supernatural. Yet for all my success, the dreams of the little girl and the teddy bear continued, leaving me restless in my penthouse suite. Something was still missing, and all the money in the world couldn't fill that void. I made it a habit to give back to the shelters and organizations that had helped me when I had nothing. Today's event was at a children's home, a place for orphans and kids waiting for adoption or foster care. I donated funds for their new recreation center, and the director had insisted I come for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. I usually avoided such public appearances, but something about this place drew me in. The building was bright and cheerful, but it was the sound of children's laughter that stirred something deep inside me as I walked through the corridors. The ceremony went smoothly, with local press taking photos of the mysterious billionaire Michael Stone making a rare public appearance. After speeches and applause, the children presented me with thank you cards and performed a little song. I smiled and played my part, but my eyes kept scanning the room, looking for something I couldn't name. That's when I saw the donation box in the corner, a collection of toys and stuffed animals for incoming children. And there, sitting atop a pile of colorful items, was a worn teddy bear with a heart-shaped mark on its paw. My world stopped. The room, the voices, everything faded as I walked toward that box, drawn by an invisible force. My hands trembled as I picked up the bear, examining the heart mark that seemed to beat in rhythm with my own racing heart. "Mr. Stone? Are you all right?" The director's voice seemed to come from miles away. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This bear. I knew this bear. Where did this come from? I finally managed to ask, my voice hardly more than a whisper. The director looked confused by my intense reaction, but answered, "We received it in a donation from the Wilson Foundation yesterday." The Wilson Foundation. My foundation, named after my late wife. But I wasn't James Wilson anymore. He had died in that crash. Hadn't he? Fragments of memories started flooding back like a broken dam. My real name, my wife Sarah, who had passed from cancer years before the crash, and Emily, my beautiful Emily with her heart-shaped birthmark matching the teddy bears. "I need to know where the Wilson Foundation is located," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. The director must have seen something in my eyes because she nodded and said, "I'll get you their contact information right away." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my study with the teddy bear, Mr. Hart, I remembered now, cradled in my hands. More memories were returning by the hour, painful and beautiful at once. Emily would be 8 now, probably living with Sarah's sister Angela and her husband, who were named as guardians in our will. Did they receive my life insurance? Did Emily still remember me? And most puzzling of all, how did Mr. Hart end up in a donation box when it was supposed to be Emily's most treasured possession? Something didn't add up, and I was determined to find answers. The Wilson Foundation offices were housed in the same building that once belonged to my company. It was surreal walking through the lobby where I used to stride confidently as James Wilson, now entering as Michael Stone, a stranger to everyone who once knew me. The receptionist smiled politely, obviously recognizing the famous reclusive billionaire, but seeing no trace of the man who used to run this place. "I have an appointment with Mrs. Angela Davis," I said, using my sister-in-law's married name. The meeting had been surprisingly easy to arrange. A generous donation offer for Michael Stone had opened doors immediately. Angela hadn't changed much in 5 years, still perfectly groomed, still wearing that forced smile that never quite reached her eyes. What I hadn't known then, but could clearly see now, was the cold calculation behind that smile. "Mr. Stone, what a pleasure to meet you. Your reputation precedes you." We shook hands, and I searched her face for any sign of recognition. There was none. To her, James Wilson was dead and buried, and Michael Stone was just another wealthy potential donor. I asked about the foundation's work, about how it was established, listening as she explained how she'd started it after her brother-in-law's tragic death. "And what about Mr. Wilson's daughter? Emily, isn't it?" I asked casually, watching her reaction carefully. Something flickered in her eyes. Annoyance? Worry? "Emily is at boarding school in Switzerland. She's doing very well," Angela replied smoothly. Too smoothly. My instincts, which had served me well in business, were screaming that something was wrong. I remembered Emily's terror of being sent away to school, how she'd cling to me whenever the subject came up. "That's wonderful," I said, matching her false smile. "Perhaps the foundation could arrange a video call with her? I like to see the real impact of my potential donations." The panic that flashed across Angela's face was brief but unmistakable. "Unfortunately, the school is very strict about outside communication. It disrupts the children's routine," she said, then quickly changed the subject to the foundation's upcoming gala. I played along, making non-committal noises about attendance while my mind raced. Something was definitely wrong. As our meeting concluded, I noticed a family photo on her desk. Angela, her husband Robert, and a girl who must be Emily. But the child in the photo looked thin, sad, nothing like the vibrant little girl I remembered. Her eyes looked hollow, and there was no trace of a smile that used to light up rooms. As I left the building, I made 2 calls, one to my investigator, a former detective who had helped me piece together my identity when my memories started returning, and another to my lawyer. "I need everything you can find on Angela and Robert Davis, their finances, and most importantly, the whereabouts of Emily Wilson," I told the investigator. To my lawyer, my instructions were even more direct. Prepare for a custody battle and possible criminal charges. And do it quietly. The game had changed. This wasn't just about reclaiming my identity anymore. This was about saving my daughter. The investigation revealed a disturbing picture. The Wilson Foundation, supposedly created to help orphan children, was primarily a tax shelter for Angela and Robert. Most of the donations went to administrative costs, their salaries, luxury cars, and a recently purchased villa in the south of France. But the most shocking discovery was about Emily. There was no Swiss boarding school. According to official records, Emily Wilson was being homeschooled by private tutors, but none of these supposed tutors could be verified as real people. My little girl had effectively disappeared from public view 3 years ago. My investigator managed to place a hidden camera near the Davis residence, an elegant mansion purchased shortly after my death. The footage made my blood run cold. Emily was there, not in Switzerland, but she was hardly living the life of a beloved child. She was thin, dressed in simple clothes unlike the designer outfits Angela's social media showed her own son wearing. More disturbing was how Emily performed household chores like a servant while the family relaxed. In one clip, when she accidentally dropped a glass, Robert shouted at her so harshly she cowered against the wall. The final piece of evidence came when my investigator discovered the truth about Mr. Hart. He found a former housekeeper who'd been fired for asking too many questions. She revealed that Emily had clung to that teddy bear every night, whispering to it about her daddy coming back someday. One night, after Emily had mentioned a dream about me coming to rescue her, Angela had taken the bear away as punishment, telling Emily that dead people don't come back, and the sooner you accept that, the better. The bear had been thrown into a donation pile. Despite Emily's heartbroken tears, my lawyers advised caution. Coming back from the dead would involve complicated legal processes, and in the meantime, Angela and Robert had legal custody of Emily. But I'd spent too long in the shadows already. I had DNA tests ready to prove my identity, financial records showing how they'd misused my daughter's inheritance, and evidence of neglect that no family court could ignore. But first, I needed to see her, to let her know she wasn't alone anymore. The annual Wilson Foundation Gala was in 3 days, an event where Emily would be present as the inspiration for the foundation's work. I spent those 3 days preparing for every contingency. Security at the gala would be tight, but as the famous Michael Stone, I'd already secured an invitation as a major potential donor. I had a team of lawyers ready with emergency custody papers, private security personnel positioned throughout the venue, and a doctor on standby in case Emily needed immediate care. The plan was set, but as I held Mr. Hart in my hands the night before the gala, I wondered if she would even recognize me. 5 years is a lifetime for a child, and my appearance had changed significantly after the crash. Would she know her father behind Michael Stone's carefully crafted facade? The gala was a glittering affair at the Grand Hotel, with celebrities and socialites mingling over champagne and canapes. Angela and Robert worked the room expertly, accepting congratulations for their charitable work, while portraying themselves as the selfless guardians of poor orphaned Emily. I watched from a distance as they paraded her around like an accessory, a sad-eyed child in an obviously uncomfortable formal dress, trained to smile on command and thank people for their generosity. Every forced smile, every rehearsed "thank you" she uttered made my resolve stronger. I waited until the formal dinner was underway before approaching their table. Angela's face lit up with dollar signs when she saw me coming. Michael Stone, finally attending their gala, represented a potential donation in the millions. "Mr. Stone, we're so honored you could join us," she gushed, gesturing to an empty seat near them. I took it directly across from Emily, who kept her eyes downcast. "I brought something for the guest of honor," I said, placing a gift-wrap box on the table. Angela looked annoyed at the interruption to her networking, but nodded permission to Emily, who carefully unwrapped the package. The moment Emily saw Mr. Hart, her entire body froze. Her small hands trembled as she lifted the teddy bear from the box, turning it over to find the heart-shaped mark on its paw. For the first time that evening, Genuine emotion flooded her face, confusion, disbelief, and the tiniest spark of hope. She looked up at me then, really seeing me for the first time. I smiled at her, the smile I used to give her every night before bed, and whispered the words that had been our special good-night ritual. Even when apart, our hearts beat as one. The recognition in her eyes was immediate and absolute. Children see what adults miss, and Emily saw through the changes in my appearance straight to the truth. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice so soft only I could hear it. Angela choked on her champagne, finally looking between Emily and me with dawning horror. Before she could react, I nodded once to Emily as silent confirmation. The transformation was magical. 5 years of sadness lifted from her small shoulders as she launched herself across the table and into my arms, sobbing and repeating, "You came back. You came back." Chaos erupted around us. Angela was shouting about security. Robert was demanding I release their daughter, and confused guests were witnessing the unfolding drama with shocked expressions. But none of it mattered. I held Emily tightly, my own tears flowing freely as I whispered, "I'm so sorry it took me so long, Princess. I'm here now." My security team moved in smoothly, forming a protective circle around us as my lawyer approached with police officers and the custody papers. The evidence against Angela and Robert was overwhelming, and the public nature of our reunion meant there would be no quiet way to make this disappear. The media called it the miracle return. Billionaire James Wilson, thought dead for 5 years, dramatically returning to rescue his daughter from greedy relatives who had mistreated her while embezzling her inheritance. The legal battles were swift and decisive. DNA tests confirmed my identity beyond any doubt, and the evidence of financial fraud and child neglect was so overwhelming that Angela and Robert accepted a plea deal rather than face a public trial. Emily was officially returned to my custody within weeks, though truthfully, we hadn't been separated since the night of the gala. The first months of our reunion were a delicate balance of joy and healing. Emily had nightmares, understandable fears of abandonment, and a heartbreaking habit of apologizing for taking up space. I found the best child psychologist to help her process the trauma, while I worked through my own guilt and grief with therapists who specialized in unusual trauma cases. We moved to a new home by the seaside, where the sound of waves helped us both sleep better at night. Most importantly, we talked about the crash, about my amnesia, about her years with Angela and Robert, and about her mother, whose memory deserved to be honored. "Did you really not remember me?" Emily asked one evening as we sat on our deck watching the sunset. Mr. Hart nestled between us. It was a fair question, one I'd struggle with myself. My mind forgot, but my heart never did, I answered truthfully. That's why I kept having dreams about a little girl and a teddy bear, even when I couldn't remember your name or face. That's why I felt so empty even when I became successful again. She considered this, wise beyond her years through necessity. "Like Mr. Hart finding his way back to me," she said finally. "Some things are just meant to be together." Our story captivated the public imagination, eventually becoming a book and later a film. People seemed to need to believe in the possibility of miracles, in families finding their way back to each other against impossible odds. We used the platform to create a real foundation, one that helped reunite families separated by disasters and funded research into treatments for amnesia and traumatic brain injuries. Emily grew into a compassionate young woman who never took family for granted, who understood from personal experience how precious and fragile connections can be. The business world was stunned to discover that mysterious billionaire Michael Stone was actually James Wilson, and my return caused quite the stir in financial markets. Some of my old business partners were thrilled to have me back, while others who had benefited from my death were considerably less enthusiastic. I approached work differently now, prioritizing time with Emily above all else. Money had its uses. It had given me the resources to find and reclaim my daughter, but I'd lived without it and knew its limitations. The true wealth was in watching Emily grow, in being there for first days of school and dance recitals, in ordinary moments that were, to me, nothing short of miraculous. Years later, When Emily was preparing to leave for college, we returned to that children's home where Mr. Hart had set our reunion in motion. We'd supported them generously over the years, but this visit was special. The opening of a new wing dedicated to helping children maintain connections with family members during separation. As we toured the facility, a small boy approached Emily, pointing at Mr. Hart, who still went everywhere with her. "Your Teddy has the same mark as me," he said shyly, showing a heart-shaped birthmark on his wrist. Emily and I exchanged glances of astonishment, both remembering how her similar birthmark had inspired the original Mr. Hart. The boy's name was Noah, and his story broke our hearts. He'd been in foster care for nearly 2 years after his mother's death from cancer. His father, a military man, was presumed killed in action overseas, though his body had never been recovered. The coincidence was too striking to ignore. Another child with a heart-shaped birthmark, another father possibly out there somewhere, whether alive or not. Emily crouched down to Noah's level, showing him her own faded birthmark. "You know what this means? We're Hart twins," she told him with a warm smile. "And Hart twins look out for each other." That evening, as we drove home, Emily was unusually quiet, lost in thought. Finally, she turned to me with determination in her eyes, the same expression she'd had as a toddler tackling a challenging puzzle. "Dad, we need to find Noah's father," she said simply. I glanced at her, seeing the young woman she'd become, compassionate but practical, empathetic but strong. "It might not be the same situation, Princess," I cautioned gently. "His father could truly be gone." She nodded, understanding the warning but undeterred. "But what if he's not? What if he's out there trying to remember, like you were? Noah deserves the same miracle I got." I couldn't argue with her logic or her heart. The search for Sergeant David Miller began the next day, utilizing resources from our foundation and my company's global connections. Emily postponed college for a year, throwing herself into the search with the same determination that had helped her survive her years with Angela and Robert. She became a regular visitor at Noah's group home, bringing him books, teaching him to play chess, and always letting him hold Mr. Hart, who seemed to give the boy the same comfort he'd once given her. They developed a sibling-like bond that helped Noah come out of his shell. The search led us to remote hospitals, homeless shelters, and veterans facilities across 3 continents. There were false leads, disappointments, and moments when even Emily's optimism faltered. "What if we're giving Noah false hope?" she asked one night after another dead end. I hugged her, remembering my own journey. "Hope is never false if it helps you keep going," I told her. "Even if we don't find his father, you're showing Noah that he matters, that someone cares enough to search the world for his family. That alone is changing his life." 6 months into our search, a promising lead emerged from a rehabilitation center in a small town in Turkey. An unidentified American man had been found by local shepherds 3 years earlier, severely injured and suffering from extensive amnesia. His military training seemed to have helped him survive against the odds, but his memories remained fragmented. The center had been trying to establish his identity without success. They sent us photographs, and while years of hardship had changed him, the resemblance to pictures of Noah's father was striking enough to warrant investigation. We arranged for DNA tests, trying to manage our expectations while hope bloomed stubbornly in our hearts. The DNA results confirmed what our hearts already knew. The man in Turkey was indeed David Miller, Noah's father. He had survived an explosion that killed everyone else in his unit, suffered traumatic brain injury, and had been slowly recovering in a place where no one knew how to connect him back to his life. When we showed him Noah's picture, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, like the first star appearing in a dark sky. "I dream about a little boy," he said quietly. "He has a mark on his wrist shaped like a heart." Emily and I exchanged glances, the parallels to my own story sending chills down my spine. Bringing David back to the United States involved complex international paperwork, medical transfers, and coordination with military authorities who were stunned to discover a soldier they declared killed in action was actually alive. Throughout the process, we prepared Noah carefully, explaining that his father was hurt and might not remember everything right away. "Like Emily's dad?" he asked, familiar with our story by now. Kind of like that, Emily answered, but every story has its own path. The important thing is he never stopped loving you, even when he couldn't remember. Noah nodded, wise beyond his years like so many children who have faced loss too early. The reunion between father and son was not the immediate dramatic recognition that Emily and I had experienced. David was still healing, still finding his way back to himself. But when Noah shyly showed him the heart-shaped birthmark on his wrist, David reached out with trembling fingers to trace it. "I used to kiss that mark every night before bed," he said, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. "I told you it was where an angel touched you before you were born." Noah's eyes widened in amazement. This was a story no one else could have known, a piece of private history between father and son that had survived even when other memories had been lost. Recovery was a long road for both of them. Noah moved into our guest house with David, giving them proximity to each other while also providing the support they both needed. David underwent specialized therapy for his brain injury, while also receiving counseling to help him process the grief of losing his wife and the years lost with his son. Noah blossomed under his father's returning love, his nightmares decreasing as security replaced uncertainty in his young life. Emily delayed college for another semester, becoming a bridge between past and present for both father and son, her own experience guiding her as she helped them rebuild their relationship. The day David was officially released from medical supervision and granted full custody of Noah was a day of celebration for all of us. We held a small party in our garden, with balloons and Noah's favorite chocolate cake. As the child laughed and played with other kids from his former group home, David pulled Emily and me aside. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me back my life, my son." Emily shook her head, her eyes shining with tears and wisdom. "No," she replied. "We just helped you find your way back to each other. Some connections are too strong to be broken, even by time or trauma or distance. We just had to believe that." That night, as Emily and I sat on our deck watching the stars, Mr. Hart nestled between us as always. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I think I finally understand why everything happened the way it did," she said softly. "If you hadn't crashed, if I hadn't gone to Angela and Robert, if they hadn't thrown away Mr. Hart, we might never have found Noah and his dad. All that pain led to this moment, to them being reunited." I was struck by her capacity to find meaning in suffering, to see patterns in chaos. "The universe has strange ways of connecting dots," I agreed, putting my arm around her shoulders. Emily left for college the following month, taking Mr. Hart with her as a reminder of where she'd been and what she'd overcome. She chose to study psychology with a focus on trauma and recovery, inspired by both our journey and David and Noah's. "I want to help people find their way back to themselves and each other," she told me. I couldn't have been prouder of the compassionate, resilient young woman she'd become. The scared little girl who'd been separated from her father had transformed her pain into purpose, her wounds into wisdom. David and Noah remained close to us, like extended family bound by something deeper than blood. David eventually joined our foundation, working specifically with veterans suffering from traumatic brain injuries and helping their families navigate the complex emotional landscape of loving someone who is simultaneously present and absent. His military training, combined with his personal experience, made him uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between medical professionals and families. "I was lost, and you found me," he often said when thanking us. "Now I get to help find others." The story of Mr. Hart and the two reunited families caught the attention of medical researchers studying the phenomenon of emotional memory, how feelings and connections can persist even when cognitive memories are damaged or lost. Emily, now in graduate school, collaborated with these researchers, contributing our experiences to a growing body of knowledge about the resilience of human bonds. "The brain may forget," one of the lead researchers noted in their published paper, "but the heart remembers." The scientific community was beginning to validate what we had experienced firsthand, that some connections transcend even the most profound amnesia. As years passed and our foundation grew, we encountered more stories like ours, families separated by disasters, accidents, conflicts, or illness, fighting against impossible odds to find their way back to each other. Not every story had a happy ending, but enough did to keep hope alive in the darkest cases. We developed specialized search protocols, worked with international agencies, and funded cutting-edge treatment for traumatic brain injuries. What had begun with a teddy bear in a donation box had blossomed into a movement that reunited hundreds of families across the world. Through it all, Mr. Hart remained our mascot and inspiration. On the 10th anniversary of our reunion, Emily, now Dr. Emily Wilson, with her doctorate in psychology, organized a gathering of families who had been reunited through our foundation's work. The grand hall of our foundation headquarters was filled with people whose stories echoed aspects of our own. Parents who had found children, siblings reconnected after decades, spouses reunited after being separated by war or disaster. David and Noah, now a tall teenager with his father's quiet strength, helped welcome guests and share their story. The atmosphere was one of profound gratitude and joy, a testament to the resilience of human connection. During the celebration, Emily gave a speech that moved everyone to tears. 10 years ago, a teddy bear with a heart-shaped mark led my father back to me after 5 years of separation. She began, holding up the now well-worn Mr. Hart. What are the odds that this stuffed animal would find its way to exactly the right place at exactly the right time? Scientists might call it coincidence, statisticians would call it improbable, but I call it a reminder that love leaves breadcrumbs for us to follow home. The room erupted in applause, many attendees nodding in recognition of the mysterious ways their own reunions had unfolded. After the formal program, a woman approached Emily and me quietly. She introduced herself as Dr. Sophia Chun, a neuroscientist specializing in memory. Your foundation's work has provided my research team with valuable case studies, she explained. We've been studying what we call emotional tethers, the connections that survive even when declarative memory is damaged. She showed us preliminary brain scan comparisons between regular amnesia patients and those who had managed to reconnect with loved ones despite memory loss. There's a distinctive pattern of neural activity when these patients are near their significant connections, even before conscious recognition occurs. Her research suggested that the brain might have multiple memory systems, with emotional connections stored differently than factual information. Think of it like this, Dr. Chen explained. The facts of your life, your name, address, profession, are like books on a shelf that can fall during an earthquake. But your deepest connections are like roots of a tree, running deeper and more protected. This explained why I had dreamed of Emily and felt an inexplicable emptiness even when I couldn't remember her, and why David had remembered the story of Noah's birthmark when other memories remained inaccessible. The implications of this research extended beyond reunion cases like ours. Dr. Chun believed it could transform treatment approaches for conditions like Alzheimer's and other dementias, focusing on preserving emotional connections even when factual memories declined. Your foundation's work isn't just reuniting families, she told us. It's helping us understand the very nature of human connection and memory. Emily was fascinated, immediately seeing the potential to help even more people. By the end of the evening, we had established a new research division within our foundation dedicated to studying and supporting these emotional tethers in various conditions affecting memory. As guests departed and the hall emptied, Emily and I found ourselves standing alone with Mr. Hart. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen him in that donation box? I asked her, gently touching the worn heart-shaped mark on the teddy bear's paw. Emily considered this thoughtfully before answering. I think we would have found each other anyway, she said finally. Different path, same destination. Some connections are just meant to be. Looking around at the photos of reunited families displayed throughout the hall, hundreds of faces shining with rediscovered joy, I knew in my heart she was right. Emily's wedding day arrived the following spring, a joyful celebration on the grounds of our seaside home. She had fallen in love with Mark, a kind-hearted pediatric surgeon she'd met through the foundation's work. As I prepared to walk her down the aisle, she surprised me by placing Mr. Hart in my hands. He needs to be part of this too, she explained, her eyes bright with happy tears. He's been with us through everything. So I walked my beautiful daughter down the aisle holding the worn teddy bear that had brought us back together, a symbol of our journey that felt entirely appropriate for this new beginning. During my father of the bride speech, I shared the story of Mr. Hart with the wedding guests, many of whom already knew pieces of our history. This little bear has taught me that objects can hold more than stuffing and fabric, I said, holding him up. They can hold hope, memory, and connections that transcend time and distance. I then presented Emily and Mark with a special gift, 2 new teddy bears, each with a tiny heart-shaped mark on their paws. For your future children, I explained, so they'll always find their way home, no matter what life brings. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, and even the most stoic guests dabbed at their eyes. Emily and Mark did indeed have children, twins, a boy and a girl, both born with the same heart-shaped birthmark that had now become a cherished family trait rather than just a coincidence. They named them Sarah, after my late wife, and James, after me. The twins grew up knowing their family history, understanding from an early age the preciousness of connection and the possibility of miracles. Mr. Hart sat on a special shelf in their nursery, watching over them as they slept, a guardian of family bonds that had survived against impossible odds. Grandpa's Teddy found him when he was lost. They would explain solemnly to visitors, reciting the story like a beloved fairy tale. Our foundation continued to grow, expanding its work beyond family reunifications to include research, support groups, and policy advocacy. The emotional tethers research with Dr. Chen yielded promising results, influencing treatment protocols for various forms of memory loss around the world. Emily's psychological insights, combined with my business acumen and David's practical experience, created a powerful team that approached problems from multiple angles. The media called us the Heart Finders, a name that began as a headline, but stuck as our reputation for seemingly impossible reunions grew. Not every story had a happy ending. We had our share of heartbreaks, cases where people remained lost despite our best efforts, or where reunions didn't heal the wounds as hoped. These cases taught us humility and the importance of supporting people through disappointment as well as joy. Finding each other is just the beginning, Emily would remind our team during difficult times. The real work is in rebuilding connections once they're found. This philosophy guided our approach, ensuring we provided long-term support rather than just the moment of reunion. The work was challenging, but witnessing families heal and reconnect made every difficulty worthwhile. As I entered my 70s, I began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the foundation, allowing Emily and her team to lead the way forward. I spent more time with my grandchildren, watching with wonder as they grew. One afternoon, while playing a game in the garden with 5-year-old James, he suddenly looked at me with an uncanny seriousness. "Grandpa, what happens if I get lost someday?" he asked. Instead of dismissing his fear, I sat beside him on the grass. "First, we would look everywhere to find you," I assured him. "But also, you have something special to help you find your way back." I gently touched the heart-shaped birthmark on his wrist, matching the one his mother and sister shared. "This is your heart map," I explained. "No matter where you go, it connects you to the people who love you. It helped me find my way back to your mommy when she was little, and it would help you find your way back to us." He considered this with the solemn concentration only children can manage. "Like Mr. Hart," he nodded, satisfied with the explanation. "Exactly like Mr. Hart," I agreed, marveling at how the story continued to provide comfort across generations. That evening, as I watched the sunset from my deck, Emily joined me with a steaming cup of tea and knowing smile. "James told me about your heart map explanation," she said, settling into the chair beside mine. Sometimes I think about how many things had to align perfectly for us to find each other again. The crash, your survival, my teddy bear ending up in that specific donation box on that specific day. It seems almost impossible when you think about it." I nodded, understanding her contemplation. The mathematical improbability of our reunion had struck me many times over the years, defying rational explanation. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, I admitted, watching the colors change in the sky. In business, I always relied on logic, statistics, probability. But our story, it breaks all those rules. Emily smiled, the wisdom of her years as both a psychologist and a mother evident in her expression. Maybe that's the point, Dad. Maybe some connections aren't meant to be explained by logic. They operate on different principles altogether. She touched her birthmark absently, a gesture I'd seen her make thousands of times when deep in thought. Dr. Chun calls them quantum entanglements of the heart. Once two hearts are connected, they remain connected across any distance. The Foundation's work had recently expanded into studying these connections scientifically, collaborating with physicists and neuroscientists who were fascinated by the patterns emerging from our thousands of documented reunions. Some were suggesting that human connections might operate on principles not unlike quantum physics, where particles once entangled remain responsive to each other regardless of distance. Do you think that's what happened with us? I asked Emily. Some sort of heart entanglement that defied the laws of probability? She considered this, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I think love creates its own physics, she said finally. It bends time and space and probability to find a way back to where it belongs. Coming from anyone else, this might have sounded like poetic sentiment. But coming from Emily, who had built her career on the scientific study of human connection, it carried the weight of observed truth. Our Foundation's research was beginning to provide empirical evidence for what poets and philosophers had claimed for centuries, that love might be the most powerful force in the universe, capable of overcoming seemingly impossible odds to reunite what belongs together. That night, I dreamed of the plane crash again, not as the nightmare had once been, but as a strange crossroads of destiny. In the dream, as the plane descended toward the ocean, I saw threads of light connecting me to Emily, unbreakable filaments that stretched but never broke through the years of separation. I woke with tears on my face, but peace in my heart, understanding at a deeper level that our separation, painful as it had been, had ultimately served a greater purpose. It had taught us both the resilience of love, had led us to help countless others, and had shown us that some bonds transcend even the most extreme circumstances life can create. Our 20th reunion anniversary was marked by a major breakthrough in Dr. Chen's research. Using advanced neural imaging and data from hundreds of cases similar to ours, her team had identified what they called the tether signature, a distinctive pattern of brain activity present in people who maintained emotional connections despite memory loss. The medical journal publishing their findings featured our story, with Mr. Hart's photo alongside brain scans showing these patterns. The Wilson-Miller cases, as they had become known in research circles, were changing how science understood the intersection of memory, emotion, and human connection. The practical applications were already helping families worldwide. New protocols for working with amnesia patients now included connection therapy, bringing them into contact with significant people, places, and objects from their past, even before conscious memory returned. Success rates for emotional recognition were promising, giving hope to families facing the devastation of having a loved one physically present but emotionally disconnected. Hospitals treating brain injuries had begun asking about significant objects that might serve as anchors, the patient's own versions of Mr. Hart, to help bridge the gap between lost memories and preserved connections. Emily's twins were now teenagers, curious and compassionate, deeply involved in the Foundation's youth programs. James, who had inherited my business instincts along with his heart-shaped birthmark, had developed a peer support network for children whose parents suffered from memory disorders. Sarah, more artistic and intuitive like her grandmother, created therapy tools using art and storytelling to help these children process their complex emotions. Watching them take up this work with such natural dedication filled me with pride and wonder, the ripples from our story continuing to spread outward through generations. On a crisp autumn morning, I received a call from a small hospital in rural Montana. A man had been found wandering in the wilderness, severely dehydrated and confused, with no identification. He kept repeating one phrase, hard on the paw. The hospital administrator had heard of our foundation's work and wondered if this might be one of our cases. I immediately dispatched a team, including David, whose experience with his own recovery made him especially effective in these situations. Within days, they had identified the man as Professor Alan Parker, a botanist who had gone missing during a research expedition 3 months earlier and was presumed dead. Professor Parker's amnesia was severe. He couldn't recall his name, profession, or how he had survived alone in the wilderness. But when his wife arrived at the hospital with their daughter's stuffed rabbit, which did indeed have a heart-shaped patch on its paw, his emotional response was immediate and profound. Though full cognitive recognition took longer, that moment of connection opened the door to his recovery. Months later, when he had regained most of his memories, he joined our research team, bringing his scientific mind to the question that had shaped so many of our lives. How do objects become vessels for emotional memory, creating pathways back to ourselves and our loved ones? As I approached my 80th birthday, the foundation prepared a special celebration, not just for me, but for the thousands of families who had found their way back to each other through our work. The event was held at a beautiful mountain retreat, where families from around the world gathered to share their stories, their challenges, and their triumphs. The diversity was striking, different languages, cultures, circumstances, but the underlying theme remained constant. Against all odds, love had found a way to reconnect what had been separated. Mr. Hart, now carefully preserved in a special display case, presided over the gathering as our honorary mascot. During the celebration, I was approached by a young neurosurgeon who had been working with Dr. Chen's team. "We've been developing a new procedure based on your foundation's research," she explained excitedly. "For patients with certain types of traumatic memory loss, we can now stimulate the regions associated with emotional tethers, helping to preserve these connections even when factual memories are compromised." Early clinical trials were showing promising results, particularly for accident victims and soldiers with combat-related trauma. Your story, literally your connection to your daughter through that teddy bear, has changed how we understand and treat brain injuries, she told me, her professional composure momentarily giving way to genuine emotion. That evening, as families shared testimonials around a massive bonfire, I watched Emily move through the crowd, stopping to comfort, congratulate, or simply listen to the people whose lives have been touched by our work. Her own children, now young adults pursuing their education, helped coordinate the event, their heart-shaped birthmarks visible on their wrists as they gestured and smiled. I was struck by how the story had evolved from a personal miracle to a movement that had transformed countless lives and even influenced medical science. What had begun with a plane crash and a teddy bear had bloomed into something far greater than I could have imagined. David joined me by the fire, his hair now gray like mine, his face weathered but peaceful. Noah, now a medical student specializing in trauma care, was deep in conversation with other young people whose families had similar stories. "Sometimes I still can't believe how it all turned out," David said quietly, watching his son. "When I was lost in that hospital in Turkey, I never imagined I'd be here 20 years later, part of something like this." I nodded, understanding completely. "That's the thing about being lost," I replied. "You can't see the path that might lead you home. But that doesn't mean it isn't there, waiting to be discovered." As the stars appeared overhead, Emily called for attention and invited everyone to participate in a special ceremony. Each family had brought an object that symbolized their reunion: photos, letters, toys, pieces of clothing, items that had helped bridge the gap between separation and reunion. These were placed gently around the base of a young tree that would remain at the retreat center, growing stronger with each passing year. Like this tree, our connections put down roots, reaching through darkness toward each other, Emily said, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. Tonight we honor those connections and the objects that helped us find our way back to love. In my later years, I devoted much of my time to writing a comprehensive account of our journey and the Foundation's work, wanting to preserve the knowledge and insights gained for future generations. Emily collaborated with me on the scientific sections, ensuring that the empirical research was accurately represented alongside the personal stories. We called it Heart Maps, the science and soul of human connection, and it quickly became both a bestseller and a textbook used in medical and psychology programs worldwide. The royalties went directly to the foundation, funding reunification efforts for families without resources to conduct their own searches. Medical technology continued to advance, influenced in part by the Foundation's research. A new system nicknamed HeartFinder combined DNA databases, facial recognition, and neural pattern matching to help identify amnesia patients and connect them with their families. The system had already facilitated hundreds of reunions that might otherwise have been impossible, particularly in cases where the separated individuals were in different countries or spoke different languages. Each success validated what we had discovered through our own experience. The human connections leave traces that can be followed home, if only we have the right tools and sufficient determination. Emily expanded the Foundation's work to include a special division focused on children affected by war, natural disasters, and refugee crises. Drawing on our experience with Noah and other children who had lost parents, this division created specialized protocols for maintaining a child's sense of connection even during physical separation. Each child received their own heart map kit, including a stuffed animal with a heart mark, a secure digital repository for family photos and messages, and regular support from trained counselors who understood the unique challenges these separations created. The kits couldn't replace missing parents, but they provided emotional anchors during traumatic transitions. The twins graduated from college and joined the Foundation full-time, bringing fresh perspectives and technological innovations. James developed an AI system that could analyze disparate data sources to identify possible matches in missing persons cases that had gone cold. Sarah created immersive virtual reality environments that helped amnesia patients reconnect with significant places from their past when physical travel wasn't possible. Together, they represented the next generation of the work we had begun, combining Emily's psychological insight with my business approach and adding their own unique talents. The Foundation would continue long after I was gone, evolving to meet new challenges while maintaining its core mission. As my health began to decline, I found myself reflecting more on the nature of connection and separation. One evening, sitting with Emily in our favorite spot overlooking the ocean, I shared these thoughts. I used to think the plane crash was the worst thing that ever happened to me, I told her. Now I see it differently. Without that separation, we might never have understood how precious our connection truly was. We might never have helped all these other families. Emily squeezed my hand, understanding as always. Sometimes we have to lose something to truly see its value, she agreed. But the beauty is in finding our way back to each other, to ourselves, to what matters most. On my 85th birthday, the Foundation unveiled its most ambitious project yet, a global network of reconnection centers, specialized facilities combining the latest medical treatments for memory disorders with holistic support for families experiencing separation. Each center featured a garden with a tree like the one from our mountain ceremony, where families could add symbols of their connections. The flagship center, located near our original Foundation headquarters, was named Heart's Way Home and featured a statue of a child holding a teddy bear with a heart-shaped mark, inspired by but not directly depicting Emily and Mr. Hart. During the opening ceremony, I watched with quiet joy as Emily delivered the keynote address, her confidence and compassion evident in every word. The frightened little girl who had lost her father had become a beacon of hope for thousands, transforming her own trauma into a lifeline for others. David sat nearby, now a distinguished program director whose personal journey had informed our work with veterans and other trauma survivors. Noah had completed medical school and was heading the clinical research division of the flagship center, his own experience giving him unique insight into the needs of children affected by family separation. The twins, now established leaders in their own right, had brought technological innovation to our humanitarian mission. James's predictive algorithms had already located 57 people previously considered untraceable, while Sarah's virtual reality systems were revolutionizing therapy for both amnesia patients and their families. They had grown up with our story, but rather than being burdened by this legacy, they had embraced and expanded it, finding their own ways to contribute to the ongoing work of reconnection. Their heart-shaped birthmarks, identical to their mothers, serve as physical reminders of the invisible threads that connected our family across generations. After the ceremony, a small girl approached me, clutching a worn teddy bear with a red heart stitched onto its paw. "My grandma says you're the teddy bear man," she said solemnly. "She says you know how teddy bears can find people who are lost." I smiled, crouching down despite my aging knees to meet her at eye level. "Your grandma is very wise," I told her. "Teddy bears are excellent at keeping important people connected." She nodded, satisfied with this answer, and showed me how her bear had a secret pocket where she kept a family photo. "In case I ever get lost," she explained. "So I'll remember who loves me." That night, as I looked at family photos spanning decades, Emily is a child with the original Mr. Hart, her wedding day, the twins' birth, countless foundation events, and family celebrations. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led us exactly where we needed to go. What had begun as personal tragedy had blossomed into a legacy of connection that would continue long after I was gone. The teddy bear with the heart-shaped mark had done far more than reunite one father and daughter. It had sparked a movement that changed how the world understood the persistence of love across time, distance, and even the betrayal of memory. In my 90th year, as my health continued to decline, Emily arranged for a special gathering of our extended Hart family, those whose lives had become intertwined with ours through the Foundation's work. David and Noah came, of course, along with Professor Parker and his family, and dozens of others whose reunions had been particularly meaningful to our journey. The twins organized the event at our seaside home, transforming the garden into a space of celebration and remembrance. Mr. Hart, now carefully preserved in a climate-controlled display case but brought out for special occasions, occupied a place of honor beside photographs documenting our 25 years of work. During the gathering, each family shared how their lives had unfolded since their reunions, the challenges they'd faced, the healing they'd experienced, the new connections they'd formed. Some had joined the Foundation's work, while others had found different ways to pay forward the miracle of reconnection they'd experienced. Their stories varied widely, but a common thread ran through them all: the understanding that love creates pathways home, even when those paths seem impossible to find or follow. As I listened, surrounded by generations of people whose lives had been touched by our journey, I felt a sense of completion unlike anything I'd known before. That evening, as twilight settled over the garden and the first stars appeared, Emily sat beside me on our favorite bench overlooking the ocean. The original Mr. Hart rested between us, just as he had countless times over the decades. "You know," she said softly, "when I was little, after they told me you had died, I used to tell Mr. Hart all my secrets and dreams. I believed he could somehow take my messages to you, wherever you were." She touched the worn heart mark on the teddy bear's paw, her fingers gentle on the faded fabric. "I never imagined he would actually bring you back to me, that he would start all of this." "The funny thing is," I replied, watching the waves catch the last light of day, "when I was lost with no memory, I still felt that something was missing. Like a phantom limb, an absence I couldn't name, but couldn't ignore either." I smiled at the memory of my confusion, the emptiness that had driven me even when I couldn't understand it. Maybe Mr. Hart was carrying your messages after all, in his own way. Maybe that's what kept me searching, kept me moving forward until I found my way back to you. Emily leaned her head against my shoulder, the gesture as natural now as it had been when she was a child needing comfort. As darkness fell and stars filled the sky above us, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the crash that had separated us, the teddy bear that had reunited us, and all the lives that had been changed in the ripples spreading outward from that moment of reconnection. From personal tragedy had come purpose, from loss had come finding, from one miracle had come many. Mr. Hart, with his worn fabric and faded marking, had become more than a stuffed toy. He was a symbol of the invisible connections that bind us to each other, connections that survive separation, trauma, time, and even the fragility of memory. Some might call it coincidence, others destiny, but I prefer to think of it as the heart finding its way home again and again, against all odds, across any distance. As our story comes full circle, I invite you to think about the connections in your own life. What invisible threads bind you to those you love? What objects, like Mr. Hart, carry the weight of your most precious memories and relationships? In a world where separation happens all too often through circumstance, conflict, or change, the power to find our way back to what matters most lies within each of us. The journey may not be easy. There will be moments of darkness, of feeling utterly lost, of wondering if reunion is even possible. But remember that some connections transcend even the most extreme circumstances. Like a heart-shaped birthmark or a well-loved teddy bear, these bonds leave marks that cannot be erased, creating pathways that lead us home when we're brave enough to follow them. What would happen if you approach your own relationships with this understanding? How might you honor and strengthen the connections that matter most to you? Perhaps there's someone you've lost touch with, someone who once meant the world to you. Or perhaps there are parts of yourself that have become disconnected, dreams set aside, passions forgotten in the rush of daily life. What would it take to find your way back? The heart remembers what the mind forgets. This isn't just poetic sentiment. Our research has shown it to be scientifically valid, a truth written into the very structure of our brains and beings. Love creates its own physics, bending time and probability to find a way back to where it belongs. Your heart, too, knows the way home, to the people, purposes, and truths that make your life meaningful. Will you listen to its guidance? Will you be brave enough to follow where it leads, even when the path seems impossible? The choice is yours, but know this. Every reunion begins with a single step, a decision to believe that what seems lost might still be found. Your own miracle might be waiting just around the corner, disguised as coincidence or chance, like a teddy bear in a donation box with a heart-shaped mark on its paw. If our story has touched you, if you feel inspired to strengthen your own connections, or perhaps help others find their way back to what matters most, I invite you to share your thoughts. What resonated most deeply with you? What connections in your own life might benefit from renewed attention and care? Your story matters too, and in sharing it, you might just help someone else find their way home. Subscribe to our channel and activate notifications to hear more stories of connection, reunion, and the mysterious ways love finds its path against all odds. Like Mr. Hart, these stories serve as guides and companions, reminding us that even in our most lost moments, we are never truly alone. The heart always remembers the way home.